Jeff Breen is a managing director of Cornerstone Fundraising and Development and founder of Fundify Limited. Jeff has been a high-value giving specialist through his agency for the past 12 years, working across trust and foundations, high net worth individuals and corporate. Originally set up to undertake capital appeals work that then broadened to revenue project and base work. In 2019, that's quite important, Jeff developed, I don't know how to pronounce that.
We are Fundify.
Thank you. A project to get the latest prospecting information on trust and foundations. As part of a recent piece of contractual work, Jeff organized a roundtable in London on AI and education, managing risks and opportunities, which attracted 30 of the largest tech and consulting firms. Thank you, Jeff, for being here.
Thanks.
Next one is Pamela. Pamela Agar leads the Council for Advancement and Support of Education, also known as CASE, because it's quite a long name, as co-executive director for Europe, alongside her job share partner, Caroline Davis. Prior to joining CASE in November 2022, Pamela and Caroline served as co-directors of external relations, communications and marketing at St. George's University of London for 3 years. Pamela has over 2 decades of experience in the education sector. She has held senior roles in communications and marketing at institutions including the Imperial College London and the Francis Crick Institute. Thank you, Pamela, for being here today. Next person on the list is not here because of the strike in flights in Finland, so he couldn't be here with us. Is Kari Plontanen, so I'm not going to say anything because he's not here. We have Ross, that you're next. I've got a bit of bio here for you. So this is Ross Sleight. He's a veteran strategist, having worked in digital for over 30 years. He's been part of the founding team of 6 influential digital companies spanning global digital marketing through to online gaming. And most recently was one of the founding team of Somo, a global digital solutions company acquired in 2022 by CI&T, listed on the New York SE. He's an active startup and scale-up investor with a portfolio of over 20 companies and is chairman of Employ, a fast-growing talent engagement platform used by some of the world's largest high-volume hiring companies. But he's also, when he has time, I don't know how you do that, he's also a trustee at Crompton, Verney, Art Gallery and Park, and has been involved in cultural charities and community interest companies throughout his career. And last but not least, you are a York University alumnus. Thank you. One more. Go. Jonathan May. Last but not least, that's Jonathan there. Thank you for being here, John. Jonathan May is CEO of and founder of Hubbub Fundraising, a fundraising suite serving the education and non-profit sectors. He's also an associate at More Partnership. Jonathan is a technologist and product strategist with a background in philanthropy and education, and has advised on digital transformation, fundraising strategy, and the ethical use of AI in fundraising. So quite an expert panel here. Feel like an imposter, but thank you all for being here. Just say hello. Thank you. I'm just going to need a pen, and I'm not very well prepared because this is being recorded. This is terrible. Thank you, Mary. So the way we're gonna start this is really by asking you to let us know about, it was this report got longer and longer. Over 40 pages or something. I mean, it is quite long. So thank you, first of all, for taking the time to read our draft report. You read the draft. We have a lovely final copy now without typos and all that. So thank you for reading the report. Pamela, may I start with you? I know what you want to talk about, but for the audience, when you read the report, what did you think? What were the insights that you think you want to highlight? What was poignant about the report that you want to talk about?
Thank you very much, and it's so great to be here today. So thanks so much to Marta, Mary and Jonathan for getting the centre off the ground. I might just start with just a few words about CASE. Is this working okay? For those of you who aren't aware of what my organisation does, we are a global membership organisation for professionals working in fundraising, alumni relations, communications and marketing, predominantly in the education sector. We serve about 3,000 schools and universities around the world, as well as charities and non-profit organisations. And here in the UK, we have about 200 members, mostly universities and independent schools. And so I'd be delighted to be involved and having an early sight of this report. I think my first feeling was feeling very reassured that the findings of this research really aligned with what we've been hearing at CASE through our own conversations and some research that we've undertaken globally as part of our CASE Insights team. We ran a survey late last year with our education sector members and are working on a piece of research out of our Washington DC office at the moment, and the findings are almost entirely fully aligned with what we've been hearing, which is reassuring for all of us. I guess a couple of things that jumped out at me, and some of which Mary has mentioned in the introduction, were really thinking about. Oh, sorry, is this better? Okay. How's that? Oh, that's very loud. So thinking about how AI is being used already in the sector, we saw very similar. I was interested to see the kind of efficiency over kind of efficacy, and individuals saving time with their communications and copywriting rather than that depth, strategic data analytics and modelling that is possible. Your findings, like Mary shared, around that being by far the most popular use of AI amongst those who are using it. So we've heard similar things around fundraisers using AI to look at generate first drafts of donor reports, content creation for social media, summarising transcripts, brainstorming ideas, all great. And some teams have taken things further around, creating highly personalised donor messaging based on custom GPTs, or identifying a donor pipeline potential using data analytics. But that is definitely in the minority. I wasn't really at all surprised to see that research with more budget being invested in AI are likely to be doing more of those things. It does take investment to unlock that potential, and I think it's going to take some time to help smaller teams really be able to do that. We ran a recent Pulse survey looking at donor pipelines quite recently, considering kind of challenges and strategies for increasing leadership level gifts. And when assessing the quality of donor pipelines, lots of our participants were saying they really didn't feel confident they had sufficient prospective donors in their pipeline to meet future giving demands. And then, when considering how they're looking at their portfolios, most of them really weren't using predictive modelling or any sort of data analytics to really dive into their alumni and stakeholder networks. And smaller teams in particular just weren't doing that at all. So I think that finding, alongside what you've seen in this report, really shows it's the small teams that could really help, could really benefit from adopting AI practices more. I guess the second and the final thing I'll say in my intro is around, I'm really struck by how much take-up is really driven by individuals, and the kind of findings in the report around how the confusion around responsibility, who is responsible for AI adoption. In our research, we've seen quite limited IT teams even being involved. It's very much driven by passionate people, or and one of the things that was interesting in the report was quite a lot of senior people, directors and senior leaders are the ones driving some of the take-up, and perhaps they feel more free to experiment and I don't know, or aren't so worried about it. But I thought that was quite interesting, that it's very individually driven and individually taught, that not many people are taking up training or even aware of training, are really finding out that information for themselves through articles, talking to people. One of the things we see at CASE programs all the time is questions, small group discussions, presentation topics, showing use cases, because I think that's how a lot of people are learning. So I think it's really clear there's a huge potential for the sector, but there's a lot of work to do to build confidence, to make sure we've really got the frameworks in place to have the kind of ethical, safe, bias-free frameworks, and that institutional support for the change management required. But I hope the creation of the centre will help with some of those things.
Thank you, Pamela. Thank you. Jonathan, would you like to give us your ideas and points of interest about the report?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, the first thing I was going to say is that we hear a lot about how AI could be the future of X, insert X. It could be the future of fundraising or the future of all sorts of other things. And I think one of the things to say is it's not really the future. It's very much here. It's now. I was on the way over and my taxi driver was asking me, where are you going? What are you doing? And when I said it was something about AI and fundraising, he said, I've been using AI. I used it to appeal a parking ticket the other day and it was brilliant. And I've to help my brother with a court case as well. And, went on to all of these kind of, use cases. And I think it's really interesting because it's not the future, it's here. It's a question, I think, for us is, are we using it wisely, and in a way that can really grow and be sustainable with us? I was also reflecting that I was at a case conference probably a month, 6 weeks ago now, and one of the messages that I pushed out, which I got some positive feedback on, was just keep experimenting. And I realized that, even in the last sort of 6 weeks, I've been thinking quite a lot more deeply about what I meant, maybe what I should have said, which wasn't really about experimentation in the way that we kind of think about it, which is just pick it up, play with it, have a go. I think what I probably should have said is more scientific experimentation. So when we think about experiments that in a scientific way, it's, okay, what are my hypotheses? What am I trying to prove or test? What did I think I was doing this for? What could I set up that would validate that? How would I prove it was, validated? And then having document all the steps that I took to get there. What did I have to change? What went wrong? What went right? And then having written all of that up, how do I get peer review? Do I share it? Do I publish it? Do I talk to other colleagues about it, etc.? And I think the experimentation that many of us are doing at the moment is pick it up myself, play with it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Put it down again. And I think the experimentation that most of us need to start doing more of is the more scientific experimentation, so that everybody's individual experimentation can contribute to the benefit of everybody else's. And I think that's how we start to build some more confidence in these tools. I think there's some other things worth saying. There's obvious areas where you can apply it. Many people have tried to apply some of the AI techniques in analytics, data, segmentation, personalization. We've heard quite a lot about that in the reports. I think there is also some really interesting caveats in that. So analytics rests on the quality of our underlying data. And if our underlying data has biases in, or is incomplete, or is dirty in other ways, which most of it is, let's face it, in the fundraising sector, the analytics starts to break down, reinforce biases and reinforce historical issues in the way that we've approached things. And I love the idea of telling great story, like personalized stories to 10,000 people. But if you produce 10,000 individual stories, my question would be, how many of them are you going to check to be confident that none of them have problems? All 10,000? Because we've not saved much time if that's the answer. There's other things that are interesting, because you can see that there was this kind of split from the report of people that where they believe they can get benefits versus where they're currently seeing benefits. And I think when you look at that kind of the more saving us time, being more efficient use case, that kind of boils down to, the way I think about that is it kind of boils down to two things: tools, the things we actually use, and the workflows, the processes and the operational side of how we do our work. The tools, well, within the fundraising sector, a lot of them are externally provided. Your CRM or your giving software, your telephone software. All of this stuff tends to be bought in from third parties. So that's very much on the vendor to figure out what they're doing and improve the tools, embed the AI within those tools, and make it better and easier for us to use. I think on the workflow side, that's on us all as fundraisers to kind of work out, where do we feel that we need to be better? Where do donors feel that we need to be better? And really listen and understand before necessarily jumping in. Workshopping, training, etc. They become super important, because we're trying to unpick areas where we don't necessarily need quick wins. We need sustainable wins. We need patterns we can repeat. So just because it made something for me slightly quicker to this year, what am I going to do next year when maybe it's somebody else's job? And I think those are really interesting. To do workflows, of course, requires infrastructure, big meaningless word, and governance, another big meaningless word. Especially within big organizations, these are two of the scariest words because they basically mean we don't do anything until somebody comes along and tells us what to do a lot of the time. And I think what again, when I think about infrastructure, what I mean is coming back to that kind of scientific experimentation point. So even if all you do is set up a shared document with a shared way of documenting each of your experiments, a common format, this is what I was looking to achieve, this is the tool I used, this is why I thought it was okay to do it, these are the experiments I did, this is what went right, this is what went wrong, this is the kind of feedback I'd like, and then share that with other people within a team. Because it's very difficult to build sort of shared knowledge bases broader than that. It's wonderful, by the way, that we've got such involvement from CASE and CIOF as well. I think they can act as incredible accelerators for the sharing of that knowledge, but it starts with us in teams kind of creating the shared infrastructure just around those experiments that we're doing. Governance, of course, governance without infrastructure is like an elephant sat on a house of cards. I mean, it collapses all the experimentation. I mean, there are many big corporates out there that have said things like, you can't use ChatGPT. You have to use Gemini because we're already paying for it, for example. And when you do that kind of thing without the context of why and what are people going to do anyway, I mean, most employees of big organizations are going to go use ChatGPT anyway if it makes them more efficient. Some of them are going to pay for it out their own pocket if it saves them time. So saying don't do it doesn't really work. So infrastructure comes first, before you can start to apply proper governance around all of this. So yeah, I think those were those were my points. I mean, I feel like in this space, especially in fundraising, like in charitable fundraising as well as in HE and wider education, we're often worried about the fact that we might be going too slow. Others are going faster. We're getting left behind. And I actually feel like this is one of those rare instances where the danger here isn't really going too slowly. The danger here is going like fast, alone, in a really dark room. So I think it's, how do we go together? Not necessarily slowly, but how do we go together and shine the light on the tools and the experiments that we're doing? So those were my thoughts.
That's fantastic quote material as well. Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks. Jeff?
Sure.
You're next. So.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to, I guess, say, having had recent experience of kind of convening this at schools level back in November, that there is, clearly this is mirrored across a number of industries, and certainly, there's nothing that's been said today that wasn't also said in like an education setting in terms of people's worries and fears. How do they go about equipping themselves to, get on with this field? And it's moving so quickly. And it's slightly insidious. So since the time the report has been done, I'm guessing everyone here uses Teams or works remotely. So if you've got new teams, then you're using AI because it's doing the notes and transcriptions for you. If you use Grammarly to, check your spelling before you send a document, then you're using AI. If you use Snapchat, you're using AI. So it's more and more creeping into the products that we use every day. Sorry, I'm now feeding back. So I guess one of the things I wanted to do that was a learning from the round table was what practical tools can you access if there's not governance or legislation that's easily accessible and coming down. And we found that by looking at industry that are spending tens or in some instances hundreds of millions in this area and developing the AI, that actually they can help de-risk it slightly for smaller organisations that will never have the capacity or the budget or the resources to be able to do this. And I guess some examples would be Accenture, big consulting firm. All of their employees now, as they come through, have to be trained on AI, just, basic stuff, what it is, how to use it, how it can be deployed, and then they can help their clients, go on that journey. And with all of their staff doing that, that's a resource that has the potential to be accessed. Intel as well have now developed a suite of AI modules, and that is from the very basic of, can you turn your computer on essentially, to are you able to write prompts that will generate actions or code, or lesson plans, because I was looking at it in the context of teaching. So there are these resources out there, and I think that there's a lot of corporate fundraisers in the room. You would have to look at your portfolio and see which organisations are technology enabled, and then how they might be able to support your work in other ways by upskilling. I will pass that on.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ross?
Thank you. So I think the first thing to say is that I've been working in digital now for 30 years, and I think that AI is the most fundamental shift that we've seen since the introduction of the web browser. And you're absolutely right. It's here, and it's growing, and it's forming, and it's doing new things at a frightening speed, an exponential rate. So I think one of the things that the report showed me was that everyone's in the same boat. And no one feels like you're going to be left behind or anything, because we're all in the same boat. We just don't know where we're heading. We don't know exactly where we're going, but we just know it's going quite fast. That means that a lot of the insight that I get is from the commercial sector. And one of the things that I think the report showed more and more, and I am a big proponent of experimentation, especially that concept of scientific experimentation to do things. But I think there's something a little bit more fundamental that we need to think about, which is just education. Just what are the potentials and possibilities of AI as we apply them across every sector, and how does that impact upon some of the things that we do in our jobs? I think that's really important, because right now, if we experiment, we tend to go down to the lowest common denominator. We get ChatGPT to go into X, Y, and Z in the basis. But actually, some of the great value that can be unlocked, and unlocking that value is something the report shows that we've yet to see within the non-profit sector at the moment, means that you need to get down to some of the more fundamental things that AI might change and might be able to provide us with greater insight for. The concept, for example, of research and understanding of companies or of donors or of sectors or whatever has changed so fundamentally with AI and what we can do. And the application of persona-based, prompting in that basis takes us down new ways of being able to save immense amounts of time. I basically strike off 3 weeks now of work, which I can now do in 3 hours. Now, it's not very good when you're doing it on a time and materials basis. I'm doing myself a cash. But you know what? This is fundamental that we need to see. And we need to see this from every place on lots of things. So the first thing I say to do is read widely and read extensively across the information that's out there, the Accentures, the McKinseys, the Bains, the academic research that's going on the basis. Chuck that all into a private GPT and start to understand what some of the use cases and some of the things that AI is really applying to at the moment, how that can be just developed, and the application of that within your own company. So I think the education is important, and that education needs to happen at every single level in an organisation. It is not for the young early starters. It is not for the old battered trustees like myself and everything. It's everywhere across the organisation. And I think that comes down to this point about regulation as well. One of the frightening things was that I think it was 67% or 63% of people in the report said no one in their organisation owns AI. And that's both a positive and a negative, actually, because AI should not sit with the IT department. It should not sit with, the chief executive and everything. AI needs to be owned cross-disciplinary across the organisation. This is the problem that we've had for the last 15 years in digital per se, is that when we've been undergoing digital transformations, we haven't been undergoing digital transformations. What we've done is we've digitized a load of things internally in the organisations. The AI transformation that is coming will need to fundamentally run through the organisation. Everyone needs to be at the same level of awareness. So in ownership, you need to have a cross-disciplinary, cross-level working group, which needs to be agile to the developments that are happening in AI, which is, as I say, moving at this exponential rate, to start to think about how you're going to begin to put the guide rails in place, both at a security and privacy and regulatory level, but also at a level of where and how you're going to use it within the organisation, and where you're going to see the opportunities to begin to do, as we talked earlier about, in the sort of experimentation. So creating a sort of a playground level of understanding and guide rails cross-disciplinary within the organisation, as well as that higher level of governance that you need. Governance is not just saying you can or cannot use this. Governance is about being able to empower people within the organisation to make the experiments and make the opportunities to be able to explore things. One of the things that jumped out of me was a quote in the report about data. And one of the organisations said, and one of the qualitative comments came in with saying that we're a small organisation, we don't have that much data. And I just disagree with that entirely, because you have massive amounts of data. You have, and data isn't the ones and zeros and the analytics and everything on its own. Data is the sort of corpus of corporate knowledge that you have created over time. Every single funding bid, every single look at another charity's annual report or the likes, all this data that's available out there, you need to begin to start to get into some form of schema or some form of a repository that you can start to play around with. And so the fundamental for any decent AI strategy that I found is the fact that you need to have a decent data strategy. And that means ensuring that the quality of data that you have in there, and obviously, and we can talk about biases, and we can talk about the biases within training data until the cows come home, but having some data in there that is better than having no data available to you. So it's really important that you get your data into place, and that is one of the first things that this cross-disciplinary group should do, is look at what you have within your organisation, what you use externally, what insight you can gather from every single piece of market research and customer insight and everything that is publicly published, how you can bring that into the organisation and start to begin to look at that and use AI to start analysing that. And then I can only echo the fact that today we're experimenting with end point solutions. Process is where the real value comes out for AI. So the change in processes are fundamental to unlocking any form of efficiency or any form of cost reduction. And you have to reinvent those processes. We did not do this in the majority of cases with digital. As I said, what we did is we digitized things rather than changed it. Digital in most large corporates is now owned. The infrastructure is owned by IT. The front end experience is owned by marketing. It's siloed. It's not properly pulled together. And so the processes need to be reinvented. And that ultimately means you're dealing with people, and you're dealing with organizational structures, and even your very operating model should come under question. Because this is what the AI revolution will do, and we're right at the start of it, and the transformation will be fundamental, but you will have to transform what you do and how you do it, and everyone around you within your organizations will have to transform what they do and how they do it in order to be able to unlock that value. And at that point, I think that, open ears, open eyes to everything is vital to that. So make this a priority, because it is not going away, I think, is the main call of this. But don't be afraid that you're suddenly being left behind, because I say we're all down the darkened corridor on the ship moving forward at vast speed. We're all in the same boat. Thank you, Pamela.
Thank you. Thanks. That is quite a positive ending. We're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. John, I don't know if you want to add anything at the moment, or would you? I'm quite happy. I would like to say something, if that's okay. I did all the interviews, all of them, and I seem to have a memory for people when I interviewed them. One of the things that really impacted me, and that I really wanted to find out when I did the interviews, was about the motivations for people that use AI, why they want to use them, for people that were against AI, and why they were against it. Where would these ideas come from, and their values? Two things were very apparent. The first one is that there is a lot of emotions that are connected to the use of AI. And I know we haven't used that word emotions, but we have referred to it in different ways about trust. And there is a lot of anxiety amongst fundraisers, the ones that we interviewed, about using AI, and the lack of knowledge, the lack of skills, and the lack of understanding what AI really is somehow making the fundraisers have to self-regulate themselves, and that is very hard work, because what they're thinking is, well, I know that if I use ChatGPT, it can help me get over the blank page syndrome, but then I don't know what happens if I input some data in there, because I don't know where the data is going to go, and then it's going to the algorithm is going to learn from what I'm doing. So it's almost like I'm using it, but I'm not confident enough to use it. Now, emotions are really important, because behaviors and emotions is what is going to drive forward the use of AI. People, what they think and what they feel. The other interesting thing that I found out is about, when somebody said, I don't want to use AI, I am quite against it. And a lot of people have had very strong feelings about it. And I said, but why? Because as the report shows, a lot of people don't really know that much about AI. They don't know how to use it, but they have strong feelings about it. And they said, well, I'm an environmentalist. And I've read a report somewhere that AI uses a lot of water and a lot of energy, and this is not good for the environment. So why would I go and search ChatGPT, which is completely, I can use another search engine, when I'm actually damaging the environment so much? Now, this is a really important insight for anybody that is trying to establish ways of working with AI within organizations. We do need to understand what people's values and beliefs come from. We need to understand why somebody says no to AI. And in this particular case, it was because of her views about the environment. This is key. This is gold knowledge for researchers to follow through. Because what is going to happen, if all these things that we want to happen at organizational level, they're not going to happen unless the root of it, the individual that is there, that needs to be trained or using AI or whatever it is that they need to do, unless those beliefs that are already stopping them, not everybody's the same, but some people are. If we need to get everybody on board, this needs to change, but they need to change not in a way like, sorry, you're wrong. We need to be really gentle and really flexible as well with these people, and for them to understand. Somebody who's an environmentalist and is saying AI uses too much water, how are we going to change their mind? How are we going to change the way they feel about it? And do we have to do that? Is it actually ethical for us to do that? I'm going into the ethics now, but there you go. So for me, those two key issues were really important, to think about people's emotions. We're not just asking people to use something. We are, at the same time, they feel something about. And some people, let me say that, were extremely positive about AI, and they loved it. And they say, oh, I'm experimenting. Yes, I'm using these. I'm researching it. They loved it. But there's another emotion. In this case, it's positive. But not everybody is like that. And I think we do really need to understand behavior within organizations before we even think about trying to change things. I have a lot more to say, but I don't want to take over. We're here with the panel experts. John, would you like to add anything now? Or
I just really have some questions.
Okay. So unless you want to ask some questions to each other, the panel, otherwise we'll ask the audience. Yes? Okay, so thank you, everybody. John, are you going to do the running around? Okay, so John is.
I can
by
do
the way,
running
now
round.
we're going to ask for questions from the audience. This is your time. These are your questions.
Hi there, thank you for that. I'm Rory from the RNLI. I just wondered if the panel had any comments looking at the report or personally on the transparency side of things. The reason I ask is already we're hearing that certain trusts and grant-making organisations have preferences on whether you're transparent with using AI, but also at a fundraising level. There was a YouGov poll last year on the use of AI in brand and marketing, and it showed that the baby boomer generation in particular, which represents our base a lot of the time, expect a high level of transparency around the use of AI in communications.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I can.
I saw you look like it, but
I feel like this is one of those that, like, in our space, I think do you want to use different mics? Oh, there's 3 of them. Excellent. No, I think in our space, my personal view on this is that we should just do the right thing. I think I think being fully disclosing our use. I mean, one of the best examples of this, where I remember having quite a heated argument with a US colleague at one point about whether it was okay to automatically generate large numbers of videos that looked or felt like they were personalized to the donor. So, the video itself, broadly the same script. The first 5 or 6 seconds say something with the donor's name in, and it closes with something with the donor's name in. There's software out there that you can go and do this and generate hundreds, thousands of these things. And there are people that will look at these and go, they look real. They're talking to me. They recorded this just for me. And there were people out there who would look at that and go, that's obviously generated by AI. And those are not along generational lines necessarily. They're just along lines of people's expertise, cynicism, background, various things. I'm incredibly cynical. I assume everything is being manipulated and whatever when it comes to this. But I know that this is the kind of stuff that would fool probably both of my parents. And so I think basically the way I think about this is, imagine how somebody would feel if you had used AI and they felt like it was personal to them, or and then they discovered that it wasn't. To me, like that makes it really obvious that it should be in our policies, it should be in our T's and C's, it should be on our websites. Like, we should just be disclosing what we have done when we've done it. And I think that's one of the other reasons why, we have to dig in when we start to do these tools. We have to document what we're doing, and like if we're going to go and use ChatGPT on a free tier, right? Let's be clear, the terms on some of the paid tiers and the APIs are different, but on the free tier, the terms can be a little intimidating, and we need to be careful with the data that we're putting in those tiers. And the same is true of many of the other tools. So let's document what we've done, where we've done it, so that when it comes to disclosing, it's easy to disclose. I think probably the next 5 years, we're going to find thousands of examples of organizations getting in trouble for using AI in silly ways. I think that's inevitable. But I think we sit in this interesting space in the sector, as a sector, where we're generally quite responsible about the way that we use data, disclose our use of data. I remember I probably think we're like ahead of what we necessarily needed to do with GDPR when it came out in many different ways. And I think, this is bigger than GDPR, but I think it's similar in the way that we're trying to be transparent and trying to communicate with donors. So, I mean, for me, that's the obvious answer. It's kind of over communication of transparency, I think, is the best approach.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jonathan.
Could we have any more questions anywhere? Am I missing any hands? There's one, brilliant.
Thank you. Thanks all for really thought-provoking comments there. And I suppose my question is the question Marta raised, because it was something I was thinking about. I was reading this morning about the dreadful kind of air pollution around Musk's factories and everything else, and it is the question, for me, it's one of the biggest barriers to AI use. On the one hand, it's environmental impact, and on the other hand, it's impact on the creative industries. And obviously that's a huge concern for everyone here, thinking about what it means for individual talent, individual art, and the use of people's creative work, and issues around copyright and so on. And I suppose it is to kind of pick up on Marta's comment and to say, if you're not going to win me over to think it's a good thing in that sense, but what are the ways of thinking about this as a tool that it matters for us to use? Or what would your answer be to that challenge of how we can use this technology responsibly?
So everyone's being very quiet.
Yeah, I think it's it's a biggie, right? You're asking a base. The environmental issue is one that we need more insight into. In particular, we have less insight into the environmental impact of, outside of the company reports as to what cloud computing as a per se is doing in terms of this. We hear lots of interesting knowledge. I mean, you look at Iceland and the number of crypto companies that moved their property, their servers directly over to Iceland to be able to utilise renewable energy in the basis. I think as an industry, the technology industry is trying to get around that because they need to, because all of them are quoted companies, so they need to be able to show their environmental impact. Although who knows with what's happening in the US at the moment whether that will be as important to companies on that basis. But so I think there is a thing. It doesn't really help with the media beginning to say, you shouldn't say please and thank you because you're using tons more water and tons more electricity on the basis. I think the size of a prompt doesn't, by necessity, sometimes reflect actually the amount of energy used on that. We're going to have to live with this. It's like the genie's out of the bottle, and we're gonna have to live with this. How we measure its impact and how we minimise its impact environmentally is going to be us ensuring that we are doing everything we can to put pressure on the companies that are providing these large language models. And that's ultimately the thing. The people who are providing the core models are the ones which are really utilising the majority of the environmental impact on that. I think there's a bigger issue with regards to things like explainability of those models as well, which is really important outside of the environmental impact, and explainability of AI, which is a huge issue. I think someone in the panel talked about it being like a corridor and a light. It was you, Jonathan, talking about that corridor and a light. And I think there's a lot more that we're going to have to deal with, that we are in a consistent level of uncertainty on these things, and that uncertainty is the status quo. And as we discover and understand more about these systems and their impact, I think we need to consider as a society, as companies, as individuals, how we modify our behaviour with them in order to minimise that impact. But I don't think we know enough about what the impact is yet to really begin to understand what it's going to be when it's properly mass adopted.
Thank you. I'd like to say something, and I know, are there any more questions? I don't want to take over. You go.
I don't want to go all nervous now I've got the mic. But my biggest fear on AI, and I am right at the start of my journey with this, but it's about the truth. So around looking at research for AI, so I recently, starting the experimental phase of putting in a potential funder and give me a bit of a breakdown and research on that. And I've already done my manual research. And the stories were different, and I'm just wondering about the information where this AI is gaining those facts. Actually, I can't. I'm trying to find the right word, but I can't sit back and I don't feel confident enough that I'm getting the right information. And we can all put a positive story out there, can't we? And not be quite right. So my question is, how do I do that? How do I relax into it? How do I believe what I'm being told? Can you help?
Take it. Go. So I think coming on to the point actually about education is super important here, because I think that you're probably using something like ChatGPT to do that, or a tool that's quite similar. And one of the things that we've got as an issue here is that these tools behave, look and feel like a human. You're interacting with somebody else typing your response. They even do it by printing the words as if somebody was typing it, just to really give you the appearance that you're interacting with a person. And we then anthropomorphize, and we think of it, as a person in some ways. And we think about concepts like knowledge and truth and honesty and things like that, which are, of course, very abstract concepts and completely missing from the way that these tools actually work. In fact, the large language models don't have a concept of fact or knowledge at all, which is why you see nonsense half the time. And this is now they're working, right, to build kind of underlying data models. So again, coming on to that point about the quality of the input data. So essentially, I'm originally technical, so I'm sort of thinking, right, what's the code underneath actually doing? But when you feed one of these LLMs, these large language models like ChatGPT, a prompt that's broad, short, and quite vague. It's not criticism, but quite vague. Tell me what you know about X donor, right? When you've already done all your research. Its job is to produce a credible looking response to a question like the question you put in. In many cases, the most likely response, contextualized by whatever it knows about you. I say knows, whatever you've previously told it about you and your organization and from all of the training data it's got in the past, which means that it doesn't need, if you think about what I said there, there's no, but it needs to be true. There's no, but reference it, etc. in any of that, okay? So when you want it to tell you something that's true, you need to tell it that it needs to have references. You need to tell it to show you the references. And then you need to check the references, because when you ask it for a reference, remember its job is to give you something that looks like a credible answer. So it will give you a fake reference just as easily as it will give you a real one. You'll find you have to actually click on the references. This is going back 6 to 9 months. In the last year or so, they have improved the logic in ChatGPT so that it will, when you ask for references, actually give you references that are for the most part real. It didn't used to. It used to just print URLs on the screen and you had to click them and see if they existed. So I guess, yeah, what I'm trying to say is that the tools that we're using at the moment work really well where you are feeding in high quality data and you're asking it to do something with that data. They work really badly when we give them broad, generic prompts where they essentially are operating at high levels of uncertainty. They're not totally sure, or they can't. Again, you see, I'm anthropomorphizing. They're not sure. Like, it's not a person, right? But like, the more uncertainty there is in the input, the more uncertainty, and we call it hallucinations. But the more randomness there is, in essence, in the output. I mean, like, just as a corollary to this, like I'm not too, although I keep saying like anthropomorphizing is a problem, I can't even say that word. I think it's also a huge opportunity because there is this, I feel like there's this, I'm going to put my crazy hat on for a minute here, right? We've gone from not really believing 5 or 10 years ago that we would ever have anything like what we have today. Most people would be astonished, right, to step into this world in 5 or 10 years. We've now got trillions of dollars being invested in this kind of stuff, not billions. And the idea that we are not going to cross a point where it starts to actually look, feel, be, for all intents and purposes, an agent that we could honestly have real human interactions with. I mean, I find that far, whether you call it conscious or not, is a bit of an artificial distinction to me because define consciousness. But actually, I think the questions when we're thinking about stuff like trust and governance and accuracy and knowledge and explainability, fascinating one, really important with AI. For some reason, not that important with humans. So, you give me an answer, am I going to ask you to explain how you got there, how all the neurons fired? And, so I mean, like, I'm not saying it's not important, but I think the big philosophical questions are going to come faster than we even dream about having answers to them about, does that thing we're asking about its resource usage. Right, it's energy usage. But if it's an entity and it's in some way alive, if it were conscious, we wouldn't necessarily be doing that. We'd be actually thinking about its rights and its ability to access, energy because it needs it, right, to survive. Does it have, So I mean, like I said, I put my crazy hat on. I'll take it off now. But I think that this is probably a lot closer. This is our lifetimes. This is not our kids' lifetimes or our kids' lifetimes. I honestly believe that before I go, there'll be things that are indistinguishable from living entities that are artificial. So,
if I can, brilliant. If I can just expand a little bit on that, just going back to education, you make an excellent point about prompting. Prompting is the new, it's the new art, the new science, right? It's basically how you write your questions, how you give it the guide rails that you wanted to operate within, how you, create personas in order to be able to look at things from different perspectives using the prompt. Prompting is something that everyone in an organization needs to learn how to do really, really well. And the second thing as well is that the more that you can utilize data that you have trust within in terms of your own data that you're utilizing, the better you're going to be. So when I come back to when I talked about the data that you have, all that knowledge you've got about your donors, right, that's the stuff which you can start to say is ours, and I want you to use that in order to be able to look at that. Remember that you make a really good point about consciousness, because I've got no idea where we are. At its base level, AI is just a really good, generative AI is just a really good prediction machine, right? It just predicts things. This next word should come after this word. It doesn't have taste. It doesn't have empathy. It doesn't have the need to be to talk as humans. So it doesn't have any of those bases to it. At its base understanding of where we are. There's lots of people who think we're at different levels of this, and that in fact, if the first thing AI would do is go off, and if it realised it was conscious, it would go off and hide itself around the internet and then take up all the energy usage, and before we know it, we're in the matrix. But we assume that to predict. The more that you can help it to predict better by using things that you have trust within, and you have trust in the way in which you put those prompts together and the information that you're using, the more likely you are to get things that will help you in your process. But what we should always think about is that AI is there as an ally to you sitting by your side. It's not there to replace what you do. It's, talk about the blank page type of thing. It's great to have the ability to start off on a blank page, but you don't then go and publish that. You don't go and then take that as being the end result in any single shape or format. What you're doing is you're helping to get to an answer quicker, because you're utilising insight and other aspects of that. So it's always the human that has to oversee, and should always be the human that oversees what the and if something doesn't feel right, then it probably ain't right when it comes down to it. This is why, but the rise of citations, use tools like Notebook LM, which is part of the Google stack, which provides citations across all the information that you put on there. It's like a private GPT, but for people with non-technical knowledge. Upload all your about 60, I think you can take about 60 different sources of data onto it, and Notebook LM will give you citations against everything. When you look at Google now and its AI overviews and its search, which is coming back, there are citations to the websites that it's using. How much do I trust those websites or not? It comes down to me as a human thinking that. So it's asking you to use your critical faculties to be able to be, to have the right trust. Trust in AI is just trust in, as we have in everything. Is that image, the question from the gentleman about, transparency in marketing, we've been manipulating images since we've had computers. And even before that, we've been manipulating images, right? We don't say that those images are being manipulated using Photoshop or whatever, right? So suddenly we produce an AI image, which might have been an image which we've taken and manipulated on top with AI, or it might be an image which is generated by AI. That's just the next stage of that in terms of the trust that we have in those things. And I think we're coming to a point whereby, and I think this came out a little bit in the report, that trust will be the fundamental factor in how we adopt or do not adopt, or how we take the benefit of or not the benefit of AI. Not the end output on the basis that is our trust as humans, and it comes down to us being humans, as you said earlier on, Marta, that will have that value.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. Just to add to this, we use Azure GPT, which basically means it's the same as ChatGPT. All our data is kind of kept in UK servers and things like that, so it's a bit more compliant. But one of the things we had to understand was where this kind of data is coming from. So all of our data in our LLM, as it were, is in-house. So that's fine and that's secure, and we can modify that and do whatever we need. But if it doesn't find what it's looking for in our system, it can then look externally, and that's like the Wild West. So largely the data's anything that's been on the web over 6 months ago, and it can harvest that from anywhere. So if it's harvesting it from Google, then chances are it's going to be relatively accurate. If it's Notebook or something, then even better if it's got all the citations. But equally, it could be drawing your donor data from Reddit, and you really do not want to be serving that up or making informed decisions on that. So you've got to have that kind of gut instinct of how good is this quality of data when you don't know the underlying sources of where it's coming from.
Thank you. We have John questions. This is Mary.
Thank you. Thanks so much for sharing such brilliant insights. I am, as somebody who is fascinated by AI and the uses within a fundraising and philanthropy context, Jonathan, I wonder if you might share the example you shared with me earlier on for new innovations and new tools that might be available to us fundraisers that's really going to enhance some of our work and practice. Would you mind?
No, it's fine. So we were playing with one of the things we do as a business is telephone fundraising campaigns, and having done a number of them now with institutions, watched the kind of the fundraising training part of it for callers, when they're about to pick the phone up and try and talk to prospective donors, and discovered, there's a reasonable amount of pain in this process, right? There's limited time to do it. It's often done through role play. Some of it's done through role play in quite a public environment. You've got all of the callers watching two people role play a scenario. Some of the things they're going to come across, some of the things those callers are going to come across are really awkward. As a prospective donor's passed away and you've just got their spouse on the phone, or someone who's literally shouting at you down the phone because they really don't want you to call them, and etc. So those are the kind of bad interactions, or difficult ones to handle, I should say. And then there are some where, really, you've got some fairly complex scenarios. You're going to make a direct debit ask, and then if they're not happy with that, then you're going to make a slightly lower level direct debit ask, and then you might drop down to a single gift ask. So again, a fairly complex scenario. You're probably going to get to practice that maybe once or twice, and in the role play scenario, but difficult to do it more times than that. Now, the other thing that's really interesting is, in these appeals, we tend to save our important donors for the last week or two. Why do we do that? Because we know that even though we've done a bunch of training, they're not ready. So we give our lower end people, the kind of people who are okay for them to practice on, for the first week or two, right? And we were thinking, okay, so how do you do this better? Now, these days, most of you would have, interacted with awful automated agents on the phone, right? Where you say the thing, no, credit card, like 15 times. It's really good now, right? If you interact with some of the technology that's out there from a voice perspective, may not be in call centers yet, but it's really good. So you can have authentic interactions with voice AI. That responds to what you say, your intonation, your tone, the content, etc. And so what we've built is a tool that lets you get your callers, and potentially even your mid or major level fundraisers as well, to be able to practice, set up scenarios that you can edit and tweak with AI voice agents. Now, this is epic because it means that you can give them the ability to go away and do this in their own time, in their own space. They can hang up the call if they made a mess of it and just have another go, and they can do those interactions as many times as they like. I had the fun example of hanging up on Bill Gates, which I've got a film of, because of course, I had no idea. Bill Gates was asking me all sorts of complicated questions about the gift he made, the impact of it, and all this other stuff. And I was like, I am not prepped for this call, right? Fake call, but it was amazing because I was able to stop and go away and figure out, what do I need to have for that interaction to be valuable for everybody? So yeah, I think this is an example of a point use case, where I think it could make a big difference to confidence, competence, skills, training, onboarding time, and hopefully the whole of a telephone appeal we can give high quality donors for. We don't have to just kind of waste a few weeks at the start. In sales training, I should say, we did some research into, is this being used in the wider commercial sector to improve sales training? And for big corporates doing SaaS, big 6-7 figure sales, this is having a 25 to 30% increase in win rates. So translating that into the more major gift world, you can imagine that could make a big difference to the way that we work, not just on the sort of telephone appeals. So yeah, happy. By the way, if anyone wants to play with this, come have a chat, or I can show you some stuff. So yeah.
checking how many minutes we've got, Hannah. -1. Oh, we've got -1 minute. I wanted to. Oh God. Okay, so we have to go. Are there any other questions before we close the panel? Oh, we have a question. Yes, John.
Sorry.
-1. So I'm just.
Just to say thank you so much. That was so interesting. It was really great to hear from you all. I'm support relations manager here at York within OPA, work with Mary and colleagues around and about. So we look after stewardship and stewarding our donors. So I'm really kind of interested in the sort of storytelling aspect that you kind of talked about, and a couple of everything that everyone said, but what you were saying, Marta, about emotion and how we let that guide us, and also what you were saying, Ross, about the kind of process side of things. I know that what I often kind of come up against in terms of my own emotional response is why would somebody want to read something that I can't be bothered to write? But I can feel that's like an emotional reaction. And I'm really interested in how, whilst we're kind of waiting perhaps for some more of that sort of governance within individual organisations, how we can kind of get over that hump of not just simply thinking about how ChatGPT or other kind of AI models can do what we're doing different, for us, how we can start to think about processes that maybe are different to how we do things now, like how to get over that hump and over our own kind of emotional response. Thank you.
Okay, good question. I have an answer for it. I have an answer to that question, yeah, I do. The answer is education. The answer is research and education, and I can see that I have colleagues here from across the university, which is really helpful. Because the things that we are talking about here are about changing behavior. We're also talking about what you were saying, mid-level changes in organization, establishing process and so on. But we need to start with the people that actually use and feel AI, because you can feel AI actually. You can feel things about it. You can feel positive, negative. You want to cry because it's so bad or so good, whatever it is. You can love it or hate it or fear it. But I think it's almost like I also have a question about it, because you are also the experts here. My question is, I do know that education is important, but what I don't think is the right track to go is to say, oh, we're going to get all the fundraisers together and we're going to tell them about AI. And then, that is it. They just learn about AI. And I don't think that is the correct approach. And I was very alarmed when one of you mentioned about the commercial providers, and they know exactly how much water their systems are spending. And I'm thinking, well, so what are we doing then if we're just educating? I don't kind of like that word, but if we're teaching all the fundraisers about how to use AI and so on, but these other people are still doing all these things, and I'm trying to teach people to change their behavior about you can use AI, even though you're environmentally conscious, it's fine. But then the other guys are there. So I'm thinking, education, but what is the role of education here? What would the role of the centre be? At what level do we need to educate? And I know we have colleagues here from the School for Business and Society. I believe that there's also some training there to be offered at terms of mid-level and organisations, how they come to establish AI as an operating within their existing system. So it's a question to a question. If anybody would like to add to it. We must be -5 or yeah. But I would just like maybe. John has an answer.
I just say
yes.
I think I guess education is an important word here, but it's also about having a conversation. So if we think about Elizabeth Sanders' work on co-design, she talks about the idea that innovation comes from this kind of Venn diagram, these two overlapping areas of expertise. And I think that's, like Jonathan's example there, I'd imagine that work came from someone who's got a deep understanding of what's needed in the fundraising sector, but also a deep understanding of the possibilities of AI. And that's great that that Venn diagram's inside Jonathan, but in reality, in many other cases, that we'll need to kind of facilitate those conversations between experts in AI, experts in technology, bring those two groups together, and have those conversations that lead to those kind of overlaps where the kind of understanding of what can be done, but equally that deep understanding of need comes through. So I guess that's my thoughts. And I think that's what I hope we'll be doing a lot through the centre, is working through those kind of processes and enabling them.
Thank you, John. This is fantastic. This is why we collaborate, because I have a question and he answers. It's fantastic. So now it's really good. And now we can move forward. I think we're minus something now. Quite, we have to go for lunch and network and eat and enjoy ourselves. So thank you so much. Thank you, Pamela. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Ross, so much for your contribution. Thank you, John, as well, for helping me chair this panel. And thank you, all of you, for being here, for listening, and for your very interesting insights and questions. Thank you.
Thank you.